the battle must be more active. In other words, I need to take the offensive. It must make up in activity or in action what it lacks in strength. In other words, we're weak. And we know we're weak. We're outnumbered. So how do we make up for that weakness? Well, we take the offensive. Just wanted to sit down and speak a few minutes about something I read this morning in my Civil War book, and it had to do with Stonewall Jackson. Stonewall Jackson was a general on the Confederate side, of course, very famous. And he's about to embark on the battlefield at Chancellorsville. Chancellorsville, one of the bloodiest, most violent battles of the Civil War. And in fact, within a few days after the battle began, he would be dead, shot by his fellow soldiers in the night, in the darkness, in the wilderness, under a bunch of trees. They couldn't tell who he was. And by accident, he was killed by his own men. You can go there today, of course, and look at the battlefield of Chancellorsville and see the monument they have erected on the spot where he was killed. But I was reading about the Battle of Chancellorsville this morning, and he made a quote that made me stop and think for a minute. And here was his quote: "It must make up in activity what it lacks in strength." He was talking to a fellow officer, and they were fixing to go into battle that day, and they were making preparations, and he was talking about the battle. He was talking about their current situation, about how the battle should be an active one, because he knew they were outnumbered. He knew they were being surrounded by Union soldiers, both from the east and from the west. They were being engulfed by two separate armies, and both of them together had them outnumbered. The Confederates were surrounded at Chancellorsville. And he made this statement that the battle must be more active. In other words, I need to take the offensive. It must make up in activity or in action what it lacks in strength. In other words, we're weak. And we know we're weak. We're outnumbered. So how do we make up for that weakness? Well, we take the offensive. We let our amount of activity increase. As our weakness increases, our amount of activity needs to increase. And that's what I was thinking about all morning. So I thought I would share that with you. And it's this idea of taking a step toward the offensive. We need to increase our activity when we're weak in some specific area. Think about vanlifers now. What weaknesses do vanlifers have? What do you think? Get in the comments and let me know. You're a vanlifer. Are you living on the road full time in an RV or a van? What are some of the weaknesses that you experience? Where is it that you are weak? Well, I thought about my own experience of life on the road, and I think one of the weaknesses I have is in the area of security. You know, you just don't feel safe. A lot of times when you're running solo, you're living alone on the road, you don't feel safe, especially if you're in an area of town that is a little iffy. You're doing some stealth parking in a parking lot somewhere, or you're boondocking out in the boonies and you're all alone, and you're thinking someone could just, come in and cause all kinds of havoc. They could break out a window and I'd be in trouble. What do I do? So it's this idea of safety and security I feel like is a weakness in my own life. And so if I were to take this lesson about being more active in an area of weakness, then that means one thing I'm going to do within the next few months is take some security training. So when it comes to the weakness I feel in terms of my own personal safety and security, I've never had any training in how to protect myself, how to defend myself. And so if I'm going to take the offensive, if I'm going to increase the activity in that part of the weakness in my life, I'm going to have to take some training. I'm going to have to find some self-defense training, and I'm going to have to get more proficient with any firearms that I may have with me. And I'm going to need to make sure I'm up to date on all the local gun laws when I travel, because each state's going to have its own various gun laws, and I may have a revolver, I may have a gun somewhere on the van, and I need to know, I need to be properly trained, I need to be properly licensed, and I need to look the local laws. And so in terms of firearms for defensive weapons while you're traveling, you need to really become more trained in that area. At least I do. And I would love to take some defensive training just on how to defend myself if I get myself into a fight. I want to know what a person who's an expert in defensive training would say about someone who breaks a window or tries to come in through the windshield or tries to block you into a parking space and not let you out. What are some things I can do? And that's what I mean about taking the action, taking the activity, increasing the activity in an area of weakness. I also happen to think about the area of loneliness since I travel solo, and I know many of us travel solo. And I know there are times when we get a little lonely. I know I do. Although I do love to be by myself and I do love to be alone, and I don't mind it at all. I enjoy the times when I'm alone. I don't feel bad when I'm alone. But there are times we're only human. We need human connection. And so what if I thought that loneliness was a weakness in my life, what kind of activity could I do to increase that in that area? Increase the activity. Well, I could become perhaps more open to making friends while I'm on the road. I could stop and talk to people. I could find other van lifers and get to know them, sit around the campfire. When you're at an RV camp, don't be a hermit. Go about and try to learn from people, try to meet people, try to increase our activity in the social area. What about the mechanical issues? I'm not a mechanic. What if my van breaks down? What am I able to do? If I have a problem in terms of the plumbing issues or the electrical issues, do I know enough to at least try to know what the problem is? So if I see my weakness also as a van lifer, as someone traveling on the road full time, if I have a weakness in the mechanical area, then I need to become more active and need to increase my activity in that weakness, which means I'm going to have to study more. I'm going to have to learn more about the mechanics of running a van. Need to learn how to deal with plumbing issues and with electrical issues and become more trained in that area. So this is the kind of stuff I'm talking about in terms of what I learned from Stonewall Jackson is if you're weak, if you're lacking strength in a certain area, to make up for that weakness, to make up for that lack of strength, you want to increase your activity. You want to go on the offensive. And so whenever I think about a weakness from now on, I'm going to try to think of Stonewall, and I'm going to try to think about increasing my activity in that specific area of weakness. Well, I want to end up with a couple of 2 or 3 tips here. Make this a little bit more practical. Tip number 1, pick one weakness and define that weakness and define some way that you can increase your activity in that area. You may not completely, in fact, I know you won't, because I won't be able to completely rid my fear or overcome my weakness in the area of mechanics, for example. There's no way I'm going to be a trained mechanic. I can't do that all training myself looking at videos on YouTube. I'm not a mechanic. I don't have any experience as a mechanic. But I can pick one area and become more knowledgeable about it. I can pick, for example, the batteries on the electrical system. I can become more knowledgeable about the way lithium batteries operate within a system, within the electrical system. I can know more about lithium batteries and pick that one area to concentrate on and try to increase my knowledge of that area. I don't have to become a total knowledgeable electrician. All I need to do is just pick one specific area to chew on. The second the second thing we can do is turn our passive concern, turn our weakness into some sort of active repetition. We don't want to be stuck in our weakness. We want to work on a problem and keep at it. We don't want to get stuck in our weakness. We want to increase our repetitions in terms of the activities we take. It's not going to do me any good if I'm lonely to spend an extra hour at the coffee shop and make a couple of conversations with folks and talk with a couple of folks. If I just do that and then return to just being a hermit, that's not going to help me. I need to continually, over a period of time, need to repeat my actions. It's the repetition that makes us stronger. It's like working out when you're lifting weights. It's the number of reps that you take that make you stronger. And so if I'm weak in a certain area, I need to increase the amount of activity. The third thing we can do is we can track our progress. Maybe now I write in a personal journal, so I can track my progress from day to day. I can write in my journal areas that I see some improvement on. There may be some other ways that you can figure out for yourself how to track your progress. Maybe you can take some sort of a self-test. What do you know about the plumbing system of a van, for example, and then maybe study that for a month and go back and retake that test and see how well you do. There are some ways that we can track to make sure that we're moving ahead, that we're not just wasting our time. So again, 3 tips. Pick one specific weakness and try to increase your activity in that weakness, become better, and do it over a period of time by repeating your actions, repeating the activity that you're taking. Come up with an action plan and work at it over a period of time, over a period of a month, 2 months. And then the third thing is track your progress. See if you're making some headway. So that one quote from Stonewall Jackson this morning turned all of this stuff inside of me, and I really thought that was a great principle, a great lesson to learn. Whenever you have a weakness, go on the offensive. Increase your activity to overcome your lack of strength. Go out and have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow.